Just like Michelangelo into the blue on heavenly wings. Cargo hand bones don't take off, no smoke, no mirror, no strings. I can't take off these dark shades. I can only say how it's too beautiful. Our town on TV, our town. There's you and me, upside down, hanging out of an airplane.
Welcome to Our Town, and I'm your host, Larry Frost, and we have a very special show for you today. Today's show is about our doughboy. Our good friend Peter Hoyt will be interviewing Mayor Thatcher Kezer, and then Peter will also be interviewing the very lovely Frances Justin, who was there the day that the doughboy was unveiled, 1929. So let's get started.
Mayor Kezer, it's great being with you this morning. It's a beautiful day in Amesbury, and I've got some questions for you.
And I'm happy to answer questions for you.
Well, I appreciate that. We've had a really interesting project going on as we investigate the history behind the Doughboy statue down in front of the middle school, and a lot of questions have come to mind. I think one of the things that I found the most remarkable, what little bit of research I've done, is thinking back to the 1920s, and I know this statue was actually dedicated in 1929, but it was a price tag of $25,000, which was an awful lot of money in that day. In my research, I've discovered that the town treasurer at that point in time, James W. Clark, sold $20,000 worth of memorial bonds towards the Doughboy statue. In turn, the state refunded $5,628 from something called the Soldiers' Bonus Fund, which was pretty remarkable in that day and age, but also the community. My understanding is they really banded together to support this effort and to provide the financial resources to make it happen. I'm wondering, as mayor of Amesbury, 2012, What are your thoughts as you reflect upon the successes of our citizens back in the early 1920s?
Well, what's interesting on some of the reading I've done on this and in that particular era, for one, they refer to what we call World War I as the World War, because they had no idea there was another one coming, and it was the biggest war up to that time, and it had such a profound impact on everyone who was around during that time. So I know there were a lot of movements during that period to commemorate the sacrifices for that period. So that, in this particular case, this was Amesbury's response to commemorate, this huge event, world event, right, that had an impact on all their lives.
That's right.
And so, it is interesting, it is amazing to see how the folks willing to step up and provide a commitment financially in order to move forward on a project like this, in order to create an artifact that would remember, not only the Great War or the World War as they call it at the time, but all the wars before it and the sacrifice of folks. So I'm not surprised, in a sense of a community, from time to time on great events, comes together and says, we're going to do this and move forward on something commemorative as this.
Sure.
To move forward.
I think it is pretty remarkable, and in my research, and I know you found this out as well, something that speaks to the support of the community at this time in our history. The dedication, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was on Armistice Day, November 11th of 1929. I can't tell you what the population of Amesbury was at that point in time, but 25,000 people, if I'm not mistaken, turned out for this dedication. They had an incredible parade. I believe there were 19 floats in the parade. My research has told me that at 11 o'clock all the church bells in town tolled to commemorate this incredible event. At the actual dedication ceremony, if I'm not mistaken, 15,000 people actually came to that event, same day, and then the principal address was given by the then Governor of Massachusetts, the Honorable Frank G. Allen. Just remarkable, again, 1929, that this small, beautiful community tucked in the northeast corner of Massachusetts could mobilize that many people to celebrate and commemorate the sacrifices of all those who've come before them for the World War and other wars. Just amazing.
It is, and don't quote me, but I'm guessing the population was probably around 10,000 in Amesbury.
I wonder.
I've looked at the numbers. I don't have them in front of me.
Yeah.
So you're looking at a magnitude of increasing the population for that day by 2.5 times, which tells me this was not just an Amesbury event. This was, a broader community, regional, and, having the governor means that, it has statewide attention to it. So I'm sure it was an incredible event for everyone that was there.
Absolutely, and Leonard Kraske, the sculptor who created that masterpiece, was world-renowned, and I'm told that, in fact, the Doughboy statue was one of his favorites, and he would bring people to see it, come along with them. In fact, he died, I believe, in August of 1950, and he was here in May, suffering from ill health, but with folks so that he could show them the fruits of his labors with that beautiful, beautiful statue. So I think that speaks volumes to what we have here in this community. Something that I wanted to ask you, Mayor Kezer, if I might. This weekend I spent some time at the statue, viewing the plaques, the carvings, and the work of Mr. Kraske, and also looking at the Captain's Well, which is a side story. Yes. He also did some work there on the panels inside the Captain's Well. That being said, I noticed that the Doughboy himself, which is a bronze edifice, and the plaques, which are also bronze, weren't looking particularly clean. I'm not sure if there is any kind of fund in place to support the maintenance and cleaning of the statues in town. Specifically, I'm thinking of the Doughboy at this point in time. Or if there's an advantage to letting them be we don't want to harm them, we don't want to damage them in any way in an attempt to clean them. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, 2 points. One, I've asked people, I've been approached as far as shining up the bronze statues like new.
Right.
And so I've done some inquiry into that as to what that would take and what it would involve. And there is a debate out there where some experts say you don't want to shine them up to be like new because there's a natural, I guess, oxidization that happens that actually coats and protects them.
I see.
Now, obviously, we want to keep them clean from the birds and leaves and just general debris that would get on them. So we would definitely want to maintain that. But there are sort of two different camps and two different opinions as to whether they should be shined up like new, and once you do that, you would have to maintain them, or whether let the natural oxidization become a protective barrier on them. And that's what gives it that greenish tint that you see in so many bronze statues all around. As far as the funds, we've been doing some research in that. Somewhere in the past, whatever remaining funds there are have been absorbed into a general account. We do have a War Memorial Committee of some folks who help advise and give guidance to taking care of all of our memorials and artifacts around the community. So we've done some work with them, one, to document all this, but as far as the maintaining, so that would just come from our general funds. I mean, we would maintain the commitment to keep these things up, keep the artifacts up, keep our history alive and relevant. And so, as a community, that would just be part of our city operations to go in from time to time and maintain and keep them.
Makes sense, and I appreciate hearing that. I know that some of our citizens in town who citizens long-standing, I think specifically of Frances Justin, for instance, in conversation with Frances, her memory was that there might have been a fund established at some point in time back in the 20s and 30s for the purpose of maintaining the Doughboy statue, but certainly over time money is used for a variety of reasons, and it's just reassuring to hear your commitment to taking care of all memorials in our community, and there are many beautiful, beautiful statues. It's interesting as you talk about committees, if I might just do a little bit of a sideline. As I investigated how this statue came to be, I did discover that in 1928 the town commissioned Leonard Kraske to create this incredible edifice and sculpt the Doughboy statue, and a committee was appointed in 1923. But given the fact that you are our mayor, it'd just be interesting to hear the names of some of these esteemed citizens who served in that capacity. The chairman of the committee was Guy L. Bean. Members were Attorney John H. O'Neill, Judge Charles I. Pettingill, Representative James Clark, Selectman G. Willis Cummings, School Board Chair Claire Yetton, and the Superintendent of Schools, Ralph Barr. I thought a pretty impressive group. Also, I discovered that it's made from this beautiful light gray granite, as we all know, and it actually came from the Rockport Granite Company, which at that time was owned by A.J. Barton. The project engineer was J.P. Titcomb. So it was many people, lots of hard work, sweat, maybe tears, and getting that work done. But what a beautiful, beautiful addition to this community, and what an appropriate way to commemorate all of those people.
And what I got from what I've read, as important and as much part of it was sort of the heart that was put into the project to make it right, to make sure that what the end result of what the statue would look like was fitting for the emotions that it was trying to put forth. I know there was a debate as far as, because you had the Navy and the Army,
That's right.
And how do you represent all of those factors in one statue, one image,
Right.
And they settled on the Doughboy. Very concerned about the facial expression, the realism of the look, all those factors. That there was a lot of thought and care not just into the physical construction of it,
Right.
but the message and the emotion that would come from it for for eternity. That
Exactly.
that statue exists.
Exactly. You know, it's amazing. Looking at him this weekend, the detail work is extraordinary. And my understanding is Mr. Kraske made many small models of the statue, which at the end of the day he brought and placed around the statue so that folks could really see and appreciate that this didn't just happen.
Right.
It was a really formative process, and he worked toward a goal, the goal being that beautiful final statue. And then, knowing your life career, I spent a lot of time looking at the panels, and as we faced the statue, the panel to our left has 14 marching soldiers from the Civil War. And I spent some time looking closely at those 14 men and the personality in each one of those figures. And if I'm not mistaken, the size of each plaque, the left-hand side, we're just talking a 5-foot by 3-foot plaque. And within that is this Civil War scene. Amazing how those figures sort of come to life and jump out at you, sort of a bas relief. And then on the right-hand side, again, another 5 by 3-foot panel, 13 marching men, 12 men with rifle on shoulder and an officer with a sword leading the charge, figures from the Spanish-American War, 1868. Again, those figures come alive when you really look intently at them and look at their face, the emotion in their face and the resolve as they march forward. And then that center panel, it's interesting, trying to represent all of the wars that had taken place to date. It's sort of a compilation. That plaque is a 3 by 4-foot figure, and it's a naval battle representative of the Revolutionary War period and the War of 1812. 5 men, many of them stripped to the waist, serving a gun on the boat, with one officer overseeing their work. Again, the figures almost come to life as you really study their faces and see their resolve, all looking in the same direction during this naval battle. Extraordinary work here in Amesbury.
And each component was, that committee worked with each component. The artist was, would come back and get approval from the committee for each of those segments. And
Right.
that was part of sort of commemorating all the wars and all the people who sacrificed in that. So again, it's an incredible amount of work.
Incredible is right, and I'm also very proud of Amesbury because on the either end of the statue, as you know, they have indicated the wars that have taken place since the time that statue was put in place. And if I might, on the left-hand side, I believe, I want to refer to my notes here, we have, of course, 1776 for the Revolutionary War, 1812 for the War of 1812, 1846 to commemorate the Mexican-American War, 1861 for our Civil War, 1868 for the Spanish-American War, and then similarly on the right-hand facing panel, 1917, World War I, 1941 for World War II, 1950 for the Korean War, 1964 for really the beginning of the Vietnam War, that atrocious conflict, and then finally the 1990 Persian Gulf War. And of course, since that time, we've had a few other unfortunate activities in our world that are yet to be noted. But I'm really proud of Amesbury, keeping on top of not forgetting those thousands and thousands of people who have given the ultimate sacrifice in any one of these wars.
And so I think it's incumbent upon a community to create those artifacts, to memorialize that history ongoing. The worst thing that I think that could happen to us in our time is that somebody in the future looks and there's a dark spot where we've not done these things.
Right.
For whatever the issues of the moment that we just
Sure.
we need to continue that and to mark through time, commemorate those events and those things that make us what we are, and so that people in the future can look back and have a better understanding of the times that we've gone through.
Absolutely. And if I might, I brought one more thing, Mayor Kezer, that I know you've seen, but I think it's pretty remarkable, because when we think about the Doughboy statue today, of course we think about it sort of to the right of the current Amesbury Middle School. but those of us who have been in town forever and a day know that originally it was in front of Amesbury High School, which burned to the ground on April 7th of 1964. But fortunately, my wife and I have a photograph of the Doughboy in its original location, and it's really quite impressive, and it gives you a nice shot of the old high school and the Captain's Well. But I thought you might like to take a peek at this. Gives you some idea of the original siting of the statue.
On how prominent it is out in front of that school.
Absolutely.
It was the centerpiece.
Yeah.
Right on the side. And for whatever reason, when that high school fire, I was there. My mother got word, and I was not quite 4 years old.
Wow.
Got my brother and I remember being across the street.
Really?
Watching that fire.
I'm going to date myself, Mayor Kezer. I was in 6th grade in Amesbury Junior High School behind the building. I was actually in Bill Reagan's manual training class. And I can remember looking out the windows and seeing the smoke, and it was a day that will and has gone down in history in this community, certainly. And so I guess now the public knows that I'm a little bit older than you are.
Yeah, and we were able to replace the school, and thankfully did not have to replace the statue.
That's absolutely right. And again, the town is to be commended on moving that massive structure with minimal damage. It's pretty impressive as you look at where it was sited originally and where it is today. Any final thoughts, Mayor Kezer, as we think about the Doughboy statue in particular, the work of Leonard Kraske, and more importantly, the manner in which this community banded together to make it happen?
Well, I would think, as we've talked about, one is from time to time creating these artifacts, but it's also preserving them, both physically but also in the minds of the members of the community, by remembering them and why they're there. I'd say I'd give a pitch for a new generation of volunteers to get involved in our War Memorial Committee to help maintain them, because a lot of the current members are folks who are up in age, who fought in a lot of these wars, some that are already listed and others yet to be listed. So really put the call out that a new generation of residents to come up and say, I want to be part of maintaining this history of our community, and we would gladly to engage them in doing so.
You know what, I'm really so happy to hear you say that, and I'm reminded of the words of people who are no longer with us. Margaret Rice, who was a renowned town historian, Holly Patton, of Patton's Hollow and the Patton Carriage Company. Holly was president of Amesbury Improvement Association for years and years and years, but those two people in particular, in conversation with them over the years, one of their greatest concerns was that we pass the torch, as you said, to other volunteers who are similarly as invested in the maintenance, preservation, and sharing of Amesbury's rich history. So thank you so much in echoing those thoughts of many long gone.
Yeah. Well, Peter, thank you for coming in and having this chat.
My pleasure, as always.
Great.
We are so lucky this morning, Francis, to have you with us. Francis Justin, I think you may be the resident historian in Amesbury now. That was a title that was held by Margaret Rice for many years, but you certainly have so much head knowledge when you reflect on Amesbury's rich history. But specifically, we're here today to talk with Francis Justin about the Doughboy statue and the work of Leonard Kraske in creating that magnificent, magnificent statue.
Right.
What are your memories, Francis?
Well, believe it or not, I was there. I was 7 years old.
For the dedication?
For the dedication. And there was the biggest parade Amesbury had ever seen. There was 17 floats, and I don't know if anybody else has told you that, but like there were 25,000 people.
25,000?
Yeah, and in town too, And then there was the parade, and there were 17 floats, and I got all my thanks to Larry Hussey. Now, he lent me this book, and it's got a wealth of knowledge. He spent many, many hours, I'm sure, in the library.
Researching.
Researching. So this contains the speeches from the governor, Allen, I think it was that we had.
That's correct, Governor Allen.
Yeah, and then we had a Congressman Andrews. And I read all their things, but deep down, the reason I'm trying to do this and get the Doughboy back to what he should be is because of the veterans. You know, my father worked hard as a Legionnaire, and so did lots of other men, you know, in town.
Certainly.
And then it goes down through all, you know, it was originally the Soldiers Memorial. But I have pictures here that show on the side there are bronze scenes of the Revolutionary War with the Navy, Spanish-American War, and the
Civil
War. Right, and they're all down there, you know?
Incredible.
And there he stands, and you can't even see what a handsome, you know, human being it was that Leonard Krasky tried to, you know, do. And by the way, here's a little bit of maybe trivia. He gave the copyright of that statue to the town of Amesbury.
So it's ours.
It's Amesbury's. So
Amesbury's only.
Absolutely, yep. But beside that, the point is that it's in memory of the veterans, and that's when my big deal is, the veterans. And they really should be memorialized.
Of course.
And in a decent and a nice statue, not something that's been, I don't think they've touched it in 83 years. They've moved it.
Sure. And it's amazing that in moving it, they were able to do that without damaging it in any way.
Right.
Quite extraordinary. Now, you know what's interesting, Francis? I'm wondering, is there an advantage to leaving this statue as it is because you don't want to damage it and trying to clean it? Or what are your thoughts?
Well, there must be a way to take all that, whatever's happening, the patina or whatever, I don't know that much about it.
The green,
and then, because you can't see what he looks like. He's just, you know, and to me, they have, I started, a few years ago, I decided, you know, I called Gloucester, and I talked to somebody over there, and I said, how did you get yours, you know? And they told me that it was a grant from the state of Massachusetts for the arts. Well, I don't know how about getting grants and so forth. So I did go to a few people in Amesbury, but it was we don't have the money. And I know it's going to be expensive.
Sure.
But I don't think that something that is as beautiful as that statue is should be left to just deteriorate.
Sure.
You know? And, well, anyway, that's my big spiel, but it's for the Veterans Memorial that I want it.
Certainly. You know, it's interesting. I was down this weekend. I spent some time at the statue, and in spite of the elements and the wear and tear that it has withstood over the years, it still really speaks to the viewer as you stand there and look at this imposing figure and realize what he represents. The thousands and thousands of people who gave their lives in so many of the wars that we've had to endure in our great nation. More importantly, I then have looked at each of those three bas-reliefs, the one of the Spanish-American War, the one of the Revolution and War of 1812, and the Civil War. And those figures come to life. Their faces tell a story. They are committed, they are on a mission, and it is communicated so powerfully through that work of Leonard Krasky. Now, if I might, Francis, you've done a lot of research over the years. I've only been researching recently, so I'm going to refer to some of my notes here. But you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is what I discovered about this man, Leonard Krasky. He was born in 1878 in England, and he actually died at 73 years of age in Boston in 1950, year before I was born. He came to the United States in 1910 and lived in New York until the end of World War I, and then moved to the Boston and Gloucester area. I was really amazed to hear that originally he was going to be a doctor, and he was a medical student for 2 years, but then he decided to focus on acting, of all things. Can you imagine?
I can't imagine.
And also the study of drawing and sculpting. Now, in addition to our beautiful Doughboy statue here in Amesbury, of course, he's probably most noted for the Gloucester fishermen, looking out over Gloucester Harbor,
Right.
commemorating all the fishermen who went down with their ships. He also sculpted a memorial to Commander George Washington DeLong in New York. He sculpted the Joy of Life, which is located in Peterborough, New Hampshire. I'm going to have to make a trip to see that. And he also worked on the World War Memorial in Lawrence, Massachusetts. Now, I also was pleased to be reminded, Francis, that Mr. Kraske not only created the Doughboy and those beautiful panels, he also worked on the Captain's Well.
Yeah, right.
He did the panel of Captain Valentine Bagley,
Right.
and I believe he worked on the two side panels that share text from John Greenleaf Whittier's poem,
Right.
The Captain's Well. And I thought that was pretty remarkable. So we really, in Amesbury, owe a great deal to Leonard Kraske and what he brought to our community and what will be here for time immemorial.
Hopefully, right. You know, and he also, it was the Walkers that ran Walker Body.
James Walker? Walker
He
Body?
and his wife were friends with Leonard Kraske, and according to what I found out, and they helped design that Captain's Well.
Really?
And I think it was the Walker family that paid
They
for it.
financed it? Now, would that be the Walker Carriage Company?
Yes, yes, it would. Where the
That's
Congregational
amazing.
Church, you know,
Sure.
you know, that house there. Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I also discovered, now, Francis, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Captain's Well was created in, let me see if I can, 1796. Does that sound right? I believe that was the
Probably,
date.
yeah, it was wooden. And,
Yeah, and it was, as a side note, he, Captain Valentine Bagley,
Right.
had been in the Arabian Sea and had a shipwreck, and then was really so thirsty on the desert, and he determined that when he returned home to Amesbury, no traveler would ever be wanting for water.
Yeah, that's
So
what I understand too.
he dug a well.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
It
amazing.
is. Yeah, there's a lot of history, you know, that.
But back to your memories of November 11th,
Okay.
1929. As you reach into the inner recesses of your vivid memory and imagination, are there any particular things that come to your mind?
No, just that it was a nice celebration, you know, that it was done, and it was, you know, the Marines came from, I don't know, whether it was Portsmouth, and they were just, everybody was so, you know, intent on making it a special, you know, time, you know.
And celebrate.
Right, and then the big deal for me at 7 was to go to the Oddfellows Hall. Now, the Oddfellows Hall was the 3rd floor that's no longer there on the corner of Water and Elm Street. You know where the
I'm trying to orient myself.
yeah, you go corner of, you know, you come around the corner by Elm Street, and then you go
Yes.
down Water Street.
Yes.
Right on that corner where Sattenstein used to.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So that was
Well,
the Oddfellow
They
Hall?
had a 3rd floor.
Ah.
And they took that 3rd floor off.
Oh, for goodness
But
sake.
before that, it was used as the American Legion meeting home, and they had a hall up there, and, you know, that was a big deal, go up and get a free lunch. You know,
I can imagine.
After the break.
Sure.
And it was a big celebration. It was wonderful.
Isn't
you know?
that remarkable?
Yep, yep.
Now, I'm sure food and beverage.
Oh, imagine, yeah,
And-
you know, up in the, yeah,
On
up
that
that's, but
3rd
I'm
floor.
sure other organizations had their own.
Certainly.
Because it was amazing how many different groups came together for this, you know, celebration and this parade. If you take a look at how many floats and who sponsored them,
Right.
the Grange, the Whittier Club, the Knights of Pythias, the Oddfellows, the, you know,
So it was,
VFW, you
I
know,
mean, what a beautiful example of the community coming together.
to honor the veterans.
That's right.
That's my big thing.
That's
and
right.
then another side thing, I don't know if you know, the class of 1949, Amesbury High School, Norman Jutras was the president.
That's a familiar name, sure.
Yeah, and they donated money to have that statue lighted up in 1940 now, you know. So that, you know, and now my next door neighbor is, they call themselves the 49ers, you know. And, but it's kind of nice to know that even then, there was an interest in it.
Isn't that
You know,
something?
yeah.
Just
So
something.
that was lighted by the class of 49.
Now, you know what, honestly, you are such a gem. What a wealth of information, and what great head knowledge you have. To do my research, I went to Amesbury Public Library and depended on the likes of Margie Shepherd and others who are so good in sharing our rich history. But help me out a bit. I'm trying to recall, after the high school fire back in 1964, and of course then the new Amesbury Middle School being built, the chronology in terms of about when that doughboy was moved to our right as we're looking at the school to make way for the school. Can you recall?
I think it's been moved twice since the
Two
school
times?
went down.
Okay.
You know? The year, I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, but it was moved, had to be moved twice.
Okay.
Yeah, because, you know, the logistics of the new middle school and the parking and the this and the that. And I've heard somebody say they like it where it is now because it's closer and it's more visible.
You know, I think they're right. I like the fact that it's in such close proximity to the Captain's Well,
right,
which is more work by Leonard Kraske.
Right.
And it lets the middle school sort of, as a standalone, have its place. And the original gates from the high school, of course, are still there. So it does all fit together very nicely. But how remarkable, Frances, that they could move it, if not once, maybe twice, as you suggested, and not damage it in any really permanent way.
Yep, that was made from Rockport granite.
That's correct.
And it's bronze.
Sure.
And think of what it would cost today to do a bronze.
Oh, my goodness.
So we have it, and I think we should keep it up and make it look good and keep it for, you know, and it's not just the World War I now, because they do have plaques on for the Vietnam and the Korean.
That's correct.
And World War II, and it's a war memorial, really.
You know, I'm so glad you mentioned that. In my conversation with the mayor, we were talking about that very thing. And again, another reason for us to be so proud of our community, because it's not just about all that happened prior with World War I and prior to World War I, but as you stated, on either side of the doughboy, we have acknowledged the dates of the other skirmishes in which we've been involved as a nation. And that's so important not to forget. Never to forget.
You know, I don't know, patriotism to me, I can remember when I was in junior high, I had Miss Settle. I don't know if you, but anyway, she was a wonderful teacher. And she instilled a lot of patriotism in me.
So important.
You know, what one teacher can do, as you know. But, yeah, and so that's what I keep saying, oh, he looks, you know, I wish he could be fixed up. I wish he could be like, you know.
Sure.
But I know, no, I don't want to get in Dutch with these. There was a committee, you know, in Amesbury. I think it was 3 people that were in charge of memorials. And I don't think they're in existence anymore. I don't know. But I just wanted to think that there's going to be more people that are going to take an interest in it, not just 3 people.
Sure. And again, this has been a recurring theme in my conversations with folks over the years, that we need more volunteers to step forward and to share our passion in celebrating, preserving, and sharing Amesbury's rich history, and that doesn't just happen. We need folks to take an active role in maintaining what we have. It's so good to have you, and I want to capture every moment and get whatever questions I might have answered. But in my research, Frances, I always thought, doughboy. Why doughboy? You know, we think of the Pillsbury doughboy. I think of donuts. So I did a little bit of research, and I wanted to share it only to hear from you if I was on the money, if what I found was accurate, or if you had a different interpretation. So I looked at, okay, how can we call it the doughboy? And I know that everybody has stated that all World War I soldiers were called doughboys. Well, we know that the wonderful fried flour dumplings, originally donuts, that was doughboy. I found that the early infantrymen in the Civil War were called a somewhat mocking name, and some people called them doughheads.
Oh, okay.
Sort of a disparaging thing. Then I also learned that a combination of a doughy flour and rice made rations that were eaten by soldiers, and they felt that these rations looked like the United States infantrymen's globular brass buttons. So the name doughboy. I then heard that there was a pipe clay used to polish uniforms and belts, and then when it rained, those would look rather doughy, hence the word doughboy. I learned that Americans marching in northern Mexico stirred up the dust, and this dust looked like adobe, doughboy, adobe, doughboy,
right.
similarity in sound. And as I think you mentioned, someone mentioned in our conversations, that as we know, all the American troops sent to Europe, if we think of the song Over There,
Yeah,
Over
right.
There, it was the Yankees were coming.
The
Call them
Yankees
the
are coming,
doughboys. This figure just was extraordinary, sobering in a way. Ultimately, 4.7 million Americans fought in World War I alone, Francis.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. 4.7 million,
Right,
all called doughboys.
right, yeah.
And as you stated so eloquently, it behooves us as citizens of Amesbury to celebrate not only the sacrifice of those 4.7 million, but the sacrifice of ever so many more in any one of the wars in which
Right.
we've been involved and sadly will continue
Right,
to be involved, because we know that's life in this world.
right.
Any final thoughts that you might have as you reflect on your life in Amesbury and the way in which our community continues to remember and celebrate those who've gone before us?
Well, I just hope that, I know if it wasn't for Rose Werner, I wouldn't be here today. She's the lady that's behind, if you want anything done, go to Rosie.
Just ask Rosie.
Yes,
She's
ask Rosie,
amazing.
And so when I was on my own trying to do it, I wasn't getting to first base. But
Sure.
I spoke to Rosie, and then, my golly, here we are today. But it's just that I don't want to see people forget
Right.
what the men and women have done for this country.
I'm so glad you said men and women.
Absolutely.
And shame on me for not mentioning our women.
You're forgiven.
Thank you
I
very
forgive
much.
you. Yes. So, but that's just, I just don't want it to be forgotten.
Right.
And that's why I try to get on, whatever, to do what I can, do.
Well,
Thanks to Rosie.
I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, and you are so right about Rosie.
And they say, the people in Rockport and people in East, said it costs a lot of money. Well, it does cost a lot of money, but they're finding money for everything else. They ought to preserve what we got.
It's very true. Your point is well taken. These photographs, Francis, are just unbelievable. It's almost as good as being right in front of the statue and looking at them eye on work. Incredible. And the resolve in these soldiers as they move forward is really quite something. How lucky am I to have the opportunity to sit with you today and to know that you were there. You actually were there to share in this celebration. And you, probably more than anyone in this community, continue to advocate for the preservation of this incredible memorial. And I'm grateful to you, and thank you so much for your time this morning, because every day is a valuable day in your life, and you're just a doll to be here.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the fact to be able to do this. God gave me the strength to keep on going, and thank you, and thank Rosie and Larry Hussey, because he was the one that came. I called him, and he said, "Oh, sure, take it and do what you want." So I do appreciate it, and thank you for the compliment. I really don't. I'm just another person that really wants this done.
Well, we're so grateful for your presence in this community. Thank you, Francis.
You're welcome.
And have a great, great day.
Thank you.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'd like to thank Peter Hoyt, Mayor Thatcher Kezer, Francis Justin, and all the research done by Larry Hussey. Work hard, stay healthy, and please take time to care for someone. From our town, bye-bye. We're out of here.
Just like Michelangelo into the blue on heavenly wings. Cargo ham bones don't take off, no smoke, no mirror, no strings. I can't take off these dark shades, I can only say how it's too beautiful. Our town on TV, our town, there's you and me. Upside down, hanging out of an airplane.